All right, welcome back, everybody. We are doing another rendition of our cybersecurity series with the one and only Kevin Sneed. So we are really excited to dive in today to ransomware risk and kind of why that is such a high risk to businesses in modern day with all the technology. So Kevin, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself like usual, and then we'll jump into the first question.
Okay, well, Alex, I really do appreciate you guys over at Ellerbrock-Norris partnering with me on this and working to try to bring these series to your insureds. I think that we're in an era and time where it's extremely valuable for a customer to have a strong security posture, and things that we were doing in the means to the end progress of doing our business. So the pizza is still the pizza, but how we get the pizza is completely different.
Oh, yeah.
We need to be staying on top of these things internally, not just with making sure that we're in the new platforms and the new ways of doing business, but that we're doing all the right things to keep ourselves safe. And so what US Pro does is we specialize in cyber liability insurance. And what we really do these days is we serve as a risk manager to guys like you, our customers, to help make their insureds better insureds in 2021 from a cyber perspective.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's great. And so, yeah, we'll dive into the first question just regarding, what is ransomware? I guess just kind of an overarching for those who maybe aren't quite familiar with what it is and kind of the effect it could possibly have on their business.
That's a good question. And that is actually probably a first question, because everybody should know what ransomware is. And it's pretty simple, because most people think, well, that's just something that, they take over my systems and I have to pay a ransom. And in the pure form, oh, well, that's absolutely right. That's what it is. But it's a malware, and it's not just a malware that's deployed into a system internally. It's something that comes from the outside in. I keep trying to explain to people that if I'm a bad guy and I want to gain unauthorized access to or use your system, which is what I call UA, if I want to gain UA to your system, then why would I want to do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one is I might want to exploit data and have a privacy compromise against you. Another reason might be that just because I'm a bad guy and I'm just wanting to create havoc, and it's
just bored,
or I'm a disgruntled employee, maybe. But the biggest reason is I'm going to be a criminal extortionist, and what I really want to do is bring you down to your knees and get some money out of you. So it's basically a squeeze operation, and it does not happen without this unauthorized access to or use of the system. And the end result here is I just don't want to. I try to explain it like this, Alex. Here's what it is. I say, if I'm a bad guy and I want to come and I want to steal from you, I break into your house in the middle of the night, I steal the flat screen off the wall, and out the door I go. That's one way. That's theft. But if I want to extort from you, if I really want to cause damage to you, what I do is I come in and I stand behind your curtains for four months, 5 months, till you and the family bolt for a week on vacation, and then I clean out your entire house. Right. And that's kind of the way this works. They're really going to get in, and then they're going to exploit. They're going to navigate around their systems, and their end goal is to get to the admin capacity, the administrators of the network, gain their credentials, and then figure out how to get to the backups. And once they have gained control of the backups, boom, they deploy the ransomware, and you have to get a decryption key in order to unlock your systems. You have to pay to get it. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Wow. It's just scary to think about that there are people out there, just kind of sitting around doing that that's kind of their job, so you always got to be aware, especially as most businesses do, as they run off of computer systems now. And, even if you're a brick and mortar business, you're still using a computer system in some fashion, whether it be to take payments, to do this, that, keep accounts. So yeah, it's really important.
Actually, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that goes back to my analogy that I was just talking about means to an end. Because exactly. If I'm Joe's Pizza and I start my operation back in 1985, everything that I do has nothing to do with digital platform. And we're now in a digital platform. Everybody's got a digital footprint, which in some cases has replaced entirely the physical footprint, but in other cases has just added another footprint in order for which you need to lock down. Right. So that pizza guy, he's making a pizza in 1985 that's the same pizza in 2021, but everything that goes into making that pizza is completely digital now, from the time clocks, the biometric punching in, the direct deposit mechanisms, the web application ordering, all of it, the whole 9 yards.
They probably even
order. So what we need to make sure is we got to insure against the means to an end.
Yeah, I said they probably even order the pepperoni and the cheese online. You know, it's
I'm sure they do. Well, that's it. The inventory system is digital. So you're right. I just didn't include that in my analogy, but that's true. The whole entire operation is completely moved into this digital footprint. And what have they done to protect themselves about any kind of loss or fire, like we like to call them, non-physical fires that's going to occur within that footprint? So that's really where we're at.
Well, so expanding on that, I guess, like how would that happen to a business? Like how does that even start? You know, where does it start?
That's a good question.
How does it happen?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So it's not a random by chance thing. So it isn't that. The first thing we need to understand is what remote desktop protocol is, because RDP is a means of gaining access to your system so that you can control the monitor, the mouse, the keyboard from a remote location as if you were sitting in front of the computer itself. And RDP is a protocol that's put within Windows-based operating systems that allows for you to gain that external access. And so it is estimated that like 42% of all unauthorized access to or use of a system is gained through these open or unused RDP ports, is what we like to call them. And so it's come down to this point that they've determined that if they can get all of these RDP ports closed, they can get an overwhelming mitigation into the ransomware amounts that they're seeing happen in these days. But I'm not sure that that's true. But I do believe that it just is going to create a different vehicle for them to do what they do, because I don't think cyber criminals are going away. I think they're here to stay. I just think that right now what we need to do is address the areas that we've identified as big problems and vulnerabilities, and that's one of them. So, you know, to touch on what I earlier said, ransomware is always coming from the outside in. So in most cases, it's really a bad dude, some guy that's in Bulgaria or in China or in Eastern Russia or somewhere, who, or parts of ransomware gangs who are responsible for doing everything that we hear about in the news today. I mean, these are the guys that are dropping the bombs. So the most popular way to do this, like I said, is to use these RDP ports, but it's not like they can randomly scroll, and they do. I want you to know that a brand new open unused RDP port that connects to the internet is identified and discovered by cyber criminals within 90 seconds of connecting to the internet. That is how fast they find them. Right. So they're looking for them, but that doesn't mean anything. They just know where they are. They can't get into them until they can identify who's the owner of them, and then they can try to find a means or ways to gain credential into the system to be able to gain it through RDP. So remember, RDP allows me to gain access to your systems. So if I can do a spoofing campaign against the owner or an employee of the owner of the RDP domain that I see that's open, well, then what I do is I gain their credentials. And once I have their credentials, I log in into their system.
Then they can change passwords and
that's exactly what it is. And that's, and this whole thing about controls, and we're going to keep talking about controls as we go through this series. This whole thing about that, those are like almost like the smoke detector, sprinkler alarm, central station fire alarm, and non-combustible building materials controls that property insurers put in 60 years ago to mitigate total losses on burning buildings. Same problem. Right. So if I can stop the RDP, well, what have I done? That's sort of like my smoke alarm. I've been able to detect. Right. I can shut it down there. And so that's why they shut it down. They shut it down and say, we're not going to give you the vehicle to be able to do it in the first place. And it still happens because people still get phished through means. Right, that's why there's another 58% to that. But the point is, if we can mitigate the biggest threat, which is close these RDP ports or layer them behind a virtual private network with MFA, then we're going to be able to mitigate the risk, because their goal is to get to the admin accounts.
And when you say virtual private network, you know, people would probably know that as VPN, right? They know the acronym, right? So yeah, that's just kind of letting people know that. Obviously they could put two and two together, but I know. Right,
and then I'm glad you said that, because that's, I always try to say what they, because there's a lot of acronyms that we're going to be using.
A lot of acronyms.
Right. And VPI is the same thing. It's just a virtual private internet. It's just a different way of configuring it so that it can be used by an internal system.
So you mentioned, you know, these people, you know, I guess fishermen, as we'll call them, right? They're in all, they could be in different countries, different continents, but they could still target you in the United States if you are doing business here. So who are their, like, who would their main targets be, and who could, if you could give an example, how many people do they target per day, like something like, yeah, who is a target on a day-to-day basis for them?
Right. You know what? I'm going to dig out some statistics so that the next time we talk, I'm going to give you that, because there are some things that you can look up that give you how many different, like, for example, US Pro, my little USProINS.com. My guy tells me that we have something on the lines of 100 attempts to gain unauthorized access to our system on a daily basis. So it's a constant threat for everybody, because they're constantly trying to get to anybody that they can get into. The idea here is this, though, is to start to filter down. Let's look at it from a lot of different angles. First of all, large lines, small lines. So small business, what's small business? I mean, under $10 million, real small business, tiny small businesses. Those are like the largest increasing sector of business in ransomware, period. So they become like huge viable targets because they're easy to get to. They have very little controls. People usually don't do much to protect themselves. They don't have any kind of security operations center. There's no SIEM system in place. In absence of a security operations center, they just don't have the controls that are in place that are going to identify unusual traffic on their systems and domains. It's all of these things. And so they become a bigger risk. But their dollar amounts are still much lower. The real key here is when we talk about averages and sizes of losses and why we want to get to it and all of those things. The average ransom as of about a month ago in cyber. And when I talk about averages, we talk about the highs, we talk about the lows, and then there's the average, right? And so the average has been hovering between 195 and 275. It goes up, it goes down a little bit, it changes. But the most recent average that I heard out there is up so much that it's worth noting. It's up to $385,000. And so that's just a lot of money, right? So you're looking at a small $10 million company that is going to, invest $30,000, $50,000 into security to be able to get insurance that's going to protect them for what is an average claim of $385,000 and is pushing in the mid-30s for a probability incentive. So in other words, there's a better than 30% chance you're going to have a ransomware event tomorrow, whoever you are, no matter who you are, right? What drives that number down is your risk class, your size, and your security controls. What drives that average up is your risk class, your size, and your security controls. So the bigger you are, the larger average claim you are. And I'm on the back end of several claims this year alone that are in the millions for ransomware, just in the ransom part of it. Because I'm telling you, ransomware is just not the ransom. People look at ransomware, Alex, and they think to myself, wow, I mean, if they do a $25,000 ransom, we can get it back, we can do it. But all right, if you're down 10 days, how much income have you lost? How much expense have you paid for which that you have still keep lights and rent and employees and healthcare and all the other expenses that you have, all of that interruption expense. And that's the money. So the real money, as you get up in the money, so if I'm dealing with a manufacturer and I'm dealing with 100 million, let's just put it in here. So if we have an $80 million manufacturer and they're down for the average on a ransomware of 11 days, they're losing 80 grand a day. And then they're multiplying that number by, give me 1 second here.
Yep.
This is important because I think this illustrates to everybody, but what we're talking about times 11, it's a $2.4 million total loss when it's all said and done on the income loss portion of that. Yeah. That's how way an underwriter is going to look at it. Now, is it really $2.4 million? I don't know. Depends on how many millions a day they make. But based upon what I'm computing back into here, the way an underwriter would, they're seeing this as something that's got to have strong controls in place. So everybody's a target. I can tell you who's the worst targets by far is anybody in a B2B type operation. So what is business to business? Yeah. That's wholesale trade. It's manufacturers, it's distributors, it's suppliers. It's all everybody in the business of moving goods from one place to another. And that's kind of what it is.
Right.
And they become the big target because, again, here you're going to have a manufacturer doing $1 billion, probably has 1,500 employees, maybe 2,000 employees, and spends almost nothing on security, cybersecurity, because why? They don't have any data. They don't have any credit card customers. They don't have any, that's why. But they become the overwhelming target above all other classes, period, is manufacturers. And so much so that it's causing the entire cyber industry to go down because of it. That's how big these are. I mean, these claims are in the millions. Some of these are in the tens of millions, just really big. Now,
and so
contractors, construction, those two industries, big or small. If you're a contractor of any kind, when I say contractor, it doesn't mean you build houses only. Window washers, electrical contractors, janitorial services, landscape firms. If you're a contractor, you're at risk. If you're in the construction industry, you're at risk. If you're healthcare, definitely at risk, especially because it expands into privacy and HIPAA problems, so it becomes a double risk. And then one of the biggest of all are municipalities and schools, so it's the government itself. And those are so problematic that nobody wants to write them anywhere anymore if they don't have MFA in place, and none of them do, and most of them don't want to get it. So these are those are the ransomware industry classes that are driving all the problems. That's not to say that your retail and commerce and restaurants aren't problems, because they are, and and we have stories of them, but it's these ones that are really the ones that are having problems.
So I mean, in the end, everybody's a target. I mean,
everyone's a target.
Yeah. So I guess you know, you mentioned average of 385K as far as a ransom goes. So I guess my last question to wrap this one up is, why is it so important for a business to be insured against loss like this?
Okay, so that's the 60% factor. And this is what I try to tell people. So let me go through something with you real quick. So in property coverage, when we're talking about straight up fire insurance for commercial insurers, the average claim is about 20 grand. The ignition to alarm from the time a fire starts to the time the smoke detector exits is about 4 minutes. So it's 20 grand and about 4 minutes. All right. The burn rate, the total burn rate, the total destruction of the building down to the ground is about 4%. So 4% of fires, you're going to have a total burn. The rest, no. It's going to be limited to an area. And yet the key thing about this whole thing is that the buy-up factor on this is 100%. So 100% of commercial insurers buy fire insurance to protect them against something that's going to have a 4% burn rate and an out-of-pocket $20,000 average claim that they're going to know about within 4 minutes from the time that it starts. That's reality. That's just reality.
Wow.
But if I look at cyber and I say, if a cyber fire in the same building starts burning, what does that look like? Well, all right, let's talk about that. The average claim, the average ransomware claim is 385 grand versus 20 grand, 385 grand versus 20 grand. And the average time from ignition to alarm is 4 months. So I'm a bad dude. I'm in your system for like 4 months for anybody who knows I'm there. So it's a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of damage can
Just
be done
lurking.
in 4 months. Right.
Yeah.
Now, and then the burn rate for uninsured risk. If I don't have cyber insurance and this event happens in my world, is about 62%. I just try to say 60%. So 60% of uninsured businesses will burn down to the ground if they have an event like this. That means they're out of business. They go bankrupt within 12 months. That's what it means. And yet the buy-up rate on cyber is still less than 30%. So still only about little less than a third of American businesses, nonprofits, municipalities, and governmental entities buy cyber today.
Well,
even today, while we speak.
I think people have to think about it as, you know, every business is transitioning into the technological age. So eventually it's going to be inevitable that to keep up with the times, keep up with the tech, and keep up with your business and other competitors, you're going to have to transition some of that if you already haven't. And so obviously, like you said, there's people all over the world that do this that fish for a living, that try to, you know, collect these ransoms for a living. I mean, this is what they do all day, every day. So
right, and there's money to be made.
There's money to be made and you catch the right person, and I mean that's it. And like you said,
right on.
They could be lurking for a few months, couple weeks. You know, you just never know when they're there. So you might as well protect yourself while you can, because in the end, if something happens, you might not even know it's happening, until it's too late.
Most don't.
Yeah.
That's just the whole problem. Most don't. And then it's always deployed on a Friday night at 2 a.m. when everybody's asleep, and there's some guy going, "Oh my gosh, we're on fire."
Right.
And that's how it works, dude. So,
well, wow.
Well, let's keep talking about more of this stuff in this series. I think there's a lot to be said about what we can do as being responsible online citizens. And so I think what we need to understand is that Kevin Sneed, can give you all the latest and greatest controls that you can implement into your corporation or your business, and it's going to make you safer. And for me, that's like saying, okay, what I'm doing now is I'm adding layers of security for you. Okay. And so you don't just have the door locks, and you don't have the Ring video doorbell and the lights and then the security system and the barking dog and the fence, but you've got 4 more layers to put on it to keep you safe. But it's those damn teenagers that keep leaving the garage door open at night when they leave, and then everybody walks in and steals the flatware. So, Alex, I think we are going to divert ourselves in our next part of our series to talk about how we can change employee behavior patterns, because I think despite all these controls that the carriers are demanding people do, they're Band-Aids.
Right.
They're not really addressing the problem. And the problem is that no matter who I am and where I'm at, and if I got bad and nefarious intentions, if I fish you, Alex, if I drill you, if I keep coming after you, but you don't give me anything that I need, I can't get into your system.
Right.
And that's kind of the key. The key is change the digital footprint into ownership of a company. Because if I go into the hotel across the street, I'm just physically in the footprint of the building.
Right.
And if I'm an employee working in that hotel, I'm just physically in the building. And we have ingrained human nature to do things to protect against causing fires in buildings, right? We just do.
Yep.
But what do we do to have innate human behavior to protect against cyber fires in building? And we don't, because we don't feel like we own it. But that's the difference between physical footprints and digital footprints right there.
Right.
Is that in physical footprints, despite the fact that we know we don't own it, we still have an obligation or a sense of moral responsibility to protect it. But in our digital footprint, we actually do own it.
Right.
Because that's our doorway into the whole entire operation. So we've got to change that dynamic. All right.
That's so true. Yep. And so, if anybody'd like to reach out to myself or Kevin, our contact info will be down in the description. And we're going to be continuing to put these videos out because we think it's so important that people kind of understand what's happening in the world, especially with cybersecurity. So until next time, Kevin, it's been awesome talking to you.
Have a safe browsing day, Alex. We'll talk to you later, man.
You as well.
Bye-bye now.